Hello, my name is David Blanchard and I am a current student at Odessa College. I am currently studying for the Occupational Safety and Health degree through Odessa College. What we are actually here today for is we're going to actually discuss a little bit of ergonomics and a little bit of the musculoskeletal disorders that can happen or be related to my career path, in which I do multiple surveys on equipment for naturally occurring radioactive material. So naturally occurring radioactive material exists everywhere. But the issue that we have is because we also use a man-made process to actually bring the product up and store it in tanks, it can collect in these vessels and these tanks, and which we require us to survey them before we actually go through and do any type of cleanup, or what they call in our field of decontamination of the equipment. In order to do that decontamination, we would actually have to survey using a meter, which would include a cable and a probe. So as you see, when you put these together, it would complete one big unit in order to survey for naturally occurring radioactive material. Some of the issues that can occur from surveying, of course, would be musculoskeletal disorders. When you are taking a survey, you're actually going to be doing a lot that is involved with bending over, stepping over things, a lot of up and down motion. So as you notice, it could lead to musculoskeletal disorders through repetitive motion, and you can also be put in a lot of awkward positions. Seeing how an actual survey will actually take anywhere from 30 minutes to hours. Just depending on how large the site is, this could actually be a big issue when it comes to that type of material. So moving on, let's actually talk about the meter itself. So the meter that I have here today represented is going to be a 2241-2. This meter is made by a Ludlam, which is out of Sweetwater, Texas. And it is a meter that is used in 90% of oil field surveying for naturally occurring radioactive material. So as you notice, it's a pretty decent size meter, and it is handheld. So you would actually have to hold it with your hand. So as you notice, one of the key musculoskeletal disorder occurrences that could happen is, of course, your hand, the grip, being in an awkward position. It is not natural for your hand to grip this for many hours. So that can actually cause a little bit of issue and could even lead to things like carpal tunnel if you were having to do it every day for multiple hours of a day. Okay, so as you notice, all the buttons on the meter itself are little. So it's actually a little tougher to be able to get in here and actually change your settings. So the great thing about surveying is once you have your settings, it's usually good to leave it alone. So that way you're not always having to get into the dials. Now, when you are doing a survey, since we are using a digital meter, we are going to actually survey today in rate meter. Rate meter is the point in which that we actually use to be able to survey for naturally occurring radioactive material. The other function is a scalar function. The scalar function is going to be used more in a setting of actually in a laboratory or to be able to test different samples of radioactive material. Okay, so moving on, as you notice, this meter does have a check source, so therefore we would actually have to do a response check in order to make sure that this meter is working properly. So as you notice, right next to the check source, there is a calibration sticker. Now this calibration sticker is going to be used to do your response check. So in order to do that, I would have my probe hooked up, and I would place my probe completely up against the meter itself, and it would give me a reading. I would check that reading up against the calibration sticker to make sure that this meter is working properly. Now the great thing about the digital meter is I do not have to do any type of battery checks. So if my batteries are low, it will actually display a battery sign on the display to let me know that these batteries are low. Therefore, I would actually just open up and change out my batteries. The batteries in this meter is going to be 2 D-cell batteries. So I would replace those batteries and I would get ready to of course, work my meter. So once again, give me 1 second. So once again, now I am actually going to look into hooking up the next piece. My next piece of this meter is going to be a 39-inch 3-foot cable. Now that is according to Ludlum, okay? So I don't want you to think that look at this ignorant guy who's telling me that 39 inches equals 3 feet. I know it does not, but that's what Ludlum has in their guide, so that's what we're going to go with today. Now this cable is very sensitive, okay? So obviously that's what leads to some of the musculoskeletal disorders is the fact that people think that they actually have to hold on to the probe at all times, which is not true. The main thing that you want to pay attention to is you don't want to put a lot of pressure on the ends, okay? So when you actually hook this cable up to the meter, we are actually going to hook it up and we are going to do our checks. So once again, like I said, we are going to switch it to rate meter, okay? You have the function to be able to use the audio, which makes it sound like this. However, I choose not to use sound when I am doing a survey because, of course, that sound can become piercing to the ears after listening to it at hours on end, okay? So the next thing that I am going to actually do before I do my survey is I'm going to open up and I'm going to place my probe up against the check source, and I'm going to make sure that everything is working properly. Now as you notice with this meter, it automatically alarms at 50 microrankeins per hour, which is the regulatory limit in majority of the states. So I'm going to reset that alarm so it is no longer going off. And I'm going to double check and make sure everything is reading properly. Okay, so this meter should read 175 microrankeins per hour, and right now I have gotten up to 160 microrankeins per hour, 163. So as long as I am within the plus or minus 20%, this meter is working properly. Okay, so now I am going to be ready to do my survey. But let's actually talk about some of the musculoskeletal disorders that can happen with surveying. NIOSH website states that repetitive motion and awkward positions is some of the leading causes to injury in the workplace. It can lead to back issues, it can lead to carpal tunnel, and it can lead to many, many other things over time. Musculoskeletal disorders can be chronic or acute, just depending on what type of injury it is and how it occurred. Okay? Now with surveying, I would say majority of your musculoskeletal disorders are going to be more on the chronic side. So it's going to be because you are doing the same thing many times over and over and over again. Okay? So that being said, you want to protect your back and your body as much as possible when you're surveying. So therefore, it is not always necessary to always have to hold on to the probe and point it directly at the item that you're surveying. Now, in order to use this probe, I would actually have to have it within 1 centimeter of the object. Okay, so that it brings up another concern. Well, now I do have to hold onto the probe and I have to hold it on contact. That is not true. Ludlum did a really good job when they designed this probe where you don't have to have it flush up against an object. You are actually allowed up to 1 inch. So this probe, or this probe actually reads within 1 inch within the probe, okay? So it actually allows you a little bit of flexibility. The main concern with any type of malfunction with this meter is going to be the cable. So you want to, yes, you want to protect your back, but you want to keep in mind to protect the cable as much as possible. So in order to do that, I'm going to show you. So a lot of people, when they actually do surveying, they think that they've got to sit here and on the bottom of the equipment, they're going to stand here and they're going to go along to survey this equipment. And you know, this routine can actually happen multiple times throughout the day. An average survey will take really about 3 hours to do. So if you notice, if I'm bent over in that position for a long time, it's going to cause a lot of problems in the back. So that can become an issue. Now, I don't have to do that. I can actually take my meter, and if you notice, I'm going to hold the cable from about the center. I'm going to take as much pressure off of the end as possible, and I'm going to hold the probe all the way up against the item. Okay? And as I go along and I survey, if you notice, I am still getting close enough to the equipment to be able to survey this equipment as I go along and survey. Now, keep in mind, I'm making sure that I take as much caution as possible to not whack the probe on the equipment as much as possible. Now, with the scintillation probe, I would actually have to move. I can move no faster than 1 foot per second in order to make sure that my readings are adequate and in good standings, okay? And then after I get done, of course, I would have to use a pen, which could also cause some issues with a lot of writing through musculoskeletal disorders, in order to notate all of my information on that equipment. Okay, so that being said, I want to show you, you can lower the probe in order to survey.